comes to drama movies, I tend to not enjoy myself with them because my one for imagination and creativity makes me crave movies that contain things that are beyond reality. However, there are a few dramas that are able to hook me in with great storytelling and positive messages, and one of them is Dead Poets Society. Robin Williams plays an English teacher who gets hired to a private school, and he inspires his students to get into poetry and to make their lives as extraordinary as they can. Here's a drama that I not only love because it has a message that I fully support, but I highly enjoy it as a beautiful all-around film. Although Robin Williams does kind of portray himself in this movie, he tones himself down enough to where he's still funny, but he takes himself seriously to get his character's points across. Also, the teenage actors are great as well. They get themselves involved in regular teenage things, but they don't act stereotypically, and I actually get behind them. Finally, what I mostly love about this movie is the message of free will. The boys in this movie are held down by the stones of conformity, and Williams teaches them to knock the stone off and just be themselves. That is a message that our society needs. Too many people are afraid to be who they are because they're afraid to be seen as weird by their peers. Well, we're all individuals, and we're all unique in our own way. We shouldn't hide who we are from others. We should be proud of our characteristics and interests. After all, those who hide who they are from others hide who they are from themselves. Dead Poets Society teaches us that conformity is outdated, and individualism and free will are the new themes of today. Like I said earlier, I don't tend to like long movies because I like to watch as many films as I can, and long movies tend to take up a majority of my time. However, if I stumble across a long movie that has so much to offer and is able to keep me entertained throughout its whole runtime, then I'm all for it. I already talked about Seven Samurai. Now, here's the American equivalent, Lawrence of Arabia. This film tells the historical tale of T.E. Lawrence, who went to Arabia during World War I to aid the Arabians in their war against the Turks. Anyone who's expecting an epic action movie with lots of military battles will be disappointed with this film. It's not about war as much as about how one man can use determination and spirit to accomplish his goals. Lawrence, played by the legendary Peter O'Toole, goes through several challenges to aid his Arabian friends against the Turks, and even though he didn't accomplish his goal the way he wished to, you have to admire him for all he went through to try and get there. Also, this movie is big, and I mean huge. This is an epic movie that lives up to its title. The desert setting is so well shot that you feel how big it is, even if you watch it on a little TV. Finally, I've always been interested in Arabian culture, so seeing it firsthand with this film helps me get a glimpse of what it's like. Lawrence of Arabia is a long and grain-scale movie, but with how well it's shot and acted, I'm sitting through its entire 228-minute runtime, enjoying every minute of it, and always loving something new every time I watch it. As you know, I recently got really into anime a little over a year ago, and it has changed my life in a lot of positive ways. Not only am I more eager to expand my horizons a little bit when it comes to entertainment, I've discovered several glorious anime TV shows and movies that have become favorites of mine. One of them is the cult classic, Akira. In a post-apocalyptic Japanese future, a member of a biker gang is given amazing psychic powers that cause him to go on a rampage. So now, the leader of the biker gang must stop the psychic before he destroys the whole world. This is a film that helped introduce anime to Western audiences, and what a kick in the gut that might have been. Americans at the time wouldn't have seen anything like this, so I'm sure the epic amount of violence this movie had might have been too much for some people. From an animation standpoint, the film is beautiful. It's full of colorful art direction and detailed background design that sets up the kind of world this movie takes place in. The characters move with lots of fluidity, and they have smoothness to their movement as well. Also, the animation is able to make this movie do more than it could have if it was a live-action movie. The characters are all interesting, and I grow attached to them the second they appear. Tetsuo is the crazy guy who goes mad with power, and Kaneda is the strong leader who will do anything to save the world. Also, the action scenes are well animated. Even though they are animated, they give the illusion that they can happen in real life, making them all the more thrilling. So, Akira is an animated movie with a kick. And what a kick it is. We're now moving on to another comic book movie. Although I'm not a comic reader, I, as a movie fan, love to watch movies based off comics that give me the illusion that I'm watching a comic book movie, not just an action movie with characters wearing bright costumes. The Crow is only one of the few examples I can think of when it comes to making a comic book movie feel like a comic book. So, in this film, the recently deceased Eric Draven is brought back to life by a crow. He then becomes an angel of death as he sets out to get revenge on the people who killed him and his pregnant fiancée. When it comes to the superheroes I love, I tend to like superheroes that don't seek revenge by going around and killing people. However, I'm willing to make an exception with the Crow. He's so anxious to get revenge and has such love for getting it that I can't help but to cheer each time he takes out a killer. While this movie does have some flaws in terms of lack of character development and a straightforward plot, it makes up for it with fast-paced action and a stylized environment. That's the main reason I love this movie. Its style. It's so full of effort and artistic beauty that I'd pop in this movie just to look at it. This is what I was talking about when I said I like comic book movies that feel like comic books. Even though I haven't read the graphic novel, this film makes me feel like I'm in a universe away from my own, just like pages of a comic book do to the readers of them. Also, the actors do amazing jobs as well. Ernie Hudson is great as a cop who helps Eric out, and the late Brendan Lee haunts the screen in what would be his final film role. So, when it comes to a movie that loves to show off how beautiful it is, The Crow is a masterpiece of gothic fantasy that I never get tired of watching. This next movie is yet another drama film, but once again, it's one that I get invested in because of how relatable it is, and how well it makes me feel. I guess the main question in the world is, what's eating Gilbert Grape? Johnny Depp plays a young adult male living in a small American town, constantly having to take care of his obese mother and his mentally challenged brother. But those deeds become difficult when his heart is borrowed by a woman who walks into his life. I never cry when it comes to watching movies, but this one came really close to finally making me say uncle. The performances are some of the best I've seen in any film. While I'm a Johnny Depp fan, he tends to mostly play giggling man-children, but this movie shows that when he wants to be serious, he can be. Also, I have a hard time believing that Leonardo DiCaprio isn't mentally challenged. Also, being a drama movie, this film just feels natural. There are no forced sad or happy moments. Moments occur at exactly the right time with exactly the right tone, never becoming too over the top. Finally, I'm a sucker for stories concerning families bonding with each other, despite how dysfunctional they can be. This film is a perfect example of that. Although the family might get on each other's nerves, they all come together at the right moments to overcome whatever challenges they face. This movie also teaches me that sometimes life might not go the way I wish it would, and it may be hard to live through sometimes. However, if you keep doing what you're doing, then you're making a difference and helping to make the lives of others better. What's Eating Gilbert Grape is one film that always puts a smile on my face. It makes me have a more optimistic view of life. We're going back to the classics again. This is one that is highly regarded among film fans, for good reason. I hope people don't think I'm adding classics to my favorites list just because I want to be taken seriously. Far from that. I only add movies that I have the utmost love for, and this is one that I watched not too long ago that I have a big love for, and that's Gone with the Wind. It tells the story from the South's point of view shortly after the Civil War, or war between the states, depending on which side you talk to. A young woman named Scarlett gets involved with the rocky love triangle that ultimately comes back to bite her in the form of the most epic line in film history. This is another movie that's told on a grand scale that modern movies don't do anymore. What I love about this movie is that as a history buff, it's great to actually see a movie that shows how badly the South was damaged by the Civil War. Some say it makes them look sympathetic and slavery look okay, but I disagree with that. While slavery was a big mistake in American history, Southerners are still humans, and they deserve to be forgiven for what they've done. Anyway, history aside, this film builds itself up well, as the romantic plot takes its sweet time unraveling and getting more and more intense as the film continues. Scarlett really is a spoiled brat that you're just wishing for Rhett to tell off in the end, and boy does he. Though this is a classic movie, it breaks down several boundaries. There's a quote that everybody knows, but it also doesn't have a happy ending where everything turns out alright, and there are some characters that die that you don't see coming. This movie had guts, and those guts are still functioning to this day. Gone with the Wind is one movie that reminds me why I love classic films so much. Nowadays, when it comes to movies about musicians, they're either documentaries, concert movies, or the musicians themselves being actors for various movies. Well, here's a movie that's about a band that is a satirical look at an average day of the said band, and it's actually a great movie by itself. It's a comedy classic, A Hard Day's Night. This film is about the Beatles as they try to survive a regular day of being the biggest band of the time period. Being a huge Beatles fan, it's not only great to see them in a movie, but it's great to know that they wanted to put the time and effort into making sure that this film stands out as a great film. I love the subplot that deals with Paul's grandfather. I'm always a fan of the old person character in movies and cartoons, and Paul's grandfather is one of the funniest old characters in entertainment. It's also great to hear some Beatles songs in the soundtrack, even if they do feel like they're shoved in. Finally, I love that the Beatles aren't all carbon copies of each other. They all have their own distinct personalities. John is the wisecracking joker, Paul is the sensitive nice guy, George is a shy recluse, and Ringo is a free-spirited youngster. On top of that, the Fab Four are all amazing actors, as they show great comedic timing and expressions. For a movie that could have easily been a cheap way to make money, it turns out being a wonderful comedic romp that you don't even have to be a Beatles fan to enjoy. When it comes to satire, I usually like tasteful spoofs of things that I'm not a fan of, that I can usually understand, but I mostly find myself enjoying parodies of things that I love even more. There's no spoof out there that I enjoyed more than Young Frankenstein. In this comedic look at the Frankenstein story, Dr. Frederick Frankenstein builds himself a monster, but it only leads him to trouble for him. Being a huge fan of the Universal Frankenstein movies, I enjoy how well this film is able to match the feel of the movies, while still having fun with itself. This movie takes the little things from the films and puts a comedic spin on them. For example, what if the blind man from Bride of Frankenstein was a clumsy oaf whose blindness causes him to screw things up? Also, what if Igor's hump kept switching between the right and left shoulder due to inconsistency with the makeup work? In my opinion, that's my favorite method of doing parody, because you have to analyze something enough to recognize its strengths, but also notice its flaws that can be lampooned. On top of great writing by Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder, as well as great directing by Brooks, the acting is also hilarious. The characters are trying their best to remain serious despite all the comedy that's going on around them, which just adds to the impact of the jokes. But, as much as I love Mel Brooks movies, I do think they tend to slow down by the last half hour, which I think is due to him putting all of his best jokes right at the beginning of each movie. Unfortunately, this movie is an exception because I find myself starting to get bored by the last act. However, I can't ignore the great material from the first two-thirds of this movie, so I'm willing to forgive the sluggish last act. Young Frankenstein still manages to be one of my favorite films. Going back to films about musicians, there are some musicians whose talent and imagination is just too much for one medium, so they have to make movies in order to express just how much creativity they have within them, and show just exactly what they have to offer. It's a shame that Weird Al Yankovic doesn't make movies too often, but I guess that's what helps UHF become all the more special. A down-on-his-luck man named George Newman buys a TV studio and uses his overactive imagination to make the wildest TV station in the world. Channel 62 quickly becomes the highest-rated syndicated channel, which makes it a target of an angry owner of the rival network. Being such a huge fan of Weird Al's music, it makes sense for me to be a fan of the only movie he's made so far. You might think that Weird Al isn't able to translate the humor of his music into an hour-and-a-half long movie, but he shows that maybe filmmaking should have been his career instead. He shows to take influence from the Zucker brothers, as this movie is full of several little skits that are related to the TV station in the film, and they all fit in well with the plot of the movie. You have to be in the right kind of mood for them because they are really silly, but if you like wacky humor, then it's your cup of tea. However, this movie has a lot more going for it than just the wacky TV shows. There's a plot going on with George trying to stay in a relationship with his girlfriend Terry, and there's also plenty of humor that comes out of the evil R.J. Fletcher, played by the great Kevin McCarthy. He's such a serious and angry character that manages to stay realistic despite all the insanity going on around him. Another lovable character is Channel 62's janitor, Stanley Spadowski, played by Michael Richards before he became known for Seinfeld. He's an innocent doofus who you just fall in love with due to how goofy he is. This is a movie that was too wacky for the public, which is why it didn't do so well at the box office. However, for lovers of live action movies that feel like cartoons, this movie is one of the crowning achievements of that genre. It takes a little bit to get going, but once it gets started, you're in for a fun ride filled with lots of off-the-wall laughs. Like a lot of people I know, I didn't want to check this movie out just based on the title. However, I saw reviews on the internet that had nothing but nice things to say about it, so I finally decided to see if it was more than just the title suggests. And yes, I can concur, The Princess Bride isn't summed up well by its title. So, a grandfather reads to his grandson a fairy tale about a young princess who's being forced into marrying a corrupted prince. So, it's up for her swashbuckling lover and a group of thieves to free her from her castle prison. The best way to describe this movie is it's a chick flick for guys. While it is a love story, it's a love story with sword fights, monsters, and of course, laughs. Lots of laughs. What I love about this movie is how self-aware it is of itself. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's instead played for laughs. Of course, for somebody expecting this to be a cheesy romantic movie, the humor comes off as unexpected, which makes it all the more hilarious. This movie also takes time to poke fun at itself, as the little kid who's being read the story represents the audience who hates it at first, but actually gets caught up in the plot and actually enjoys himself. Not many movies do that, but when they do it well, I appreciate it. I just love how it's set in its own little world, and it's able to get humor from that. It doesn't rely on fourth wall breaking or wacky humor that other movies like it would resort to. All the characters are fun as well, and they all have their unique and quirky personalities that set them apart from all the others. Also, the sword fights actually help progress the story, rather than just being shoved in to attract the male audience. The Princess Bride is overall just a fantastic comedy that's able to succeed because it teaches us to expect the unexpected.